At exactly 8:15 on the morning of August 6, 1945, a blinding flash of light erased the sky over Hiroshima, Japan. In a single, horrifying instant, a bustling city was transformed into a raging inferno. This was the first time in human history that an atomic bomb had been used in warfare, and it was a moment that would change the world forever. What happened that morning didn't just end countless lives. It violently threw open the doors to the atomic age, forcing all of humanity to stare into the abyss of its own destructive power. The decision to use the atomic bomb wasn't made overnight. It was the terrifying culmination of years of scientific breakthroughs, high-stakes political maneuvering, and the desperation of a world ravaged by 6 long years of war. By mid-1945, Nazi Germany had fallen, but the war in the Pacific raged on. Allied forces were staring down the barrel of a full-scale invasion of Japan, a grim prospect that was predicted to cost millions of lives on both sides. Rewind to 1939. Famed physicist Albert Einstein, alarmed by whispers that Germany might be developing a devastating new weapon, urged U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt to kickstart America's own atomic research. This plea gave birth to the Manhattan Project, a top-secret program that assembled some of the most brilliant scientific minds of the century. Led by the enigmatic J. Robert Oppenheimer, after years of intense clandestine work, they succeeded. On July 16, 1945, in the desolate New Mexico desert, the first atomic bomb was detonated. The Trinity test unleashed a power so immense, it shocked even the very scientists who had created it. With Germany defeated, the full focus of the United States shifted to Japan. President Harry Truman, who had taken office after Roosevelt's death, faced an impossible choice: use this terrifying new weapon to force a quick surrender, or continue a conventional war that was already devastating Japan's cities and would lead to a bloody invasion. After intense debate among his advisors, the decision was made. The bomb would be used. Hiroshima, a major military and industrial hub with a population of around 350,000, was chosen as the primary target. The goal was to deliver a blow so catastrophic that Japan would have no choice but to surrender, avoiding the carnage of a ground invasion. At dawn on August 6, the B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay lifted off from Tinian Island in the Pacific. In its belly, it carried Little Boy, the world's first atomic weapon destined for war. At 8:15 a.m., flying high above Hiroshima, the crew released their payload. 43 seconds later, the bomb exploded. In that one moment, it unleashed a burst of heat and light equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. At the epicenter, temperatures soared past 1,000,000 degrees Celsius, vaporizing everything and everyone within a 1-kilometer radius. People were erased from existence, leaving only their shadows permanently burned onto walls and stone steps. A supersonic blast wave leveled buildings for miles, followed by a firestorm that swept through the wooden city, trapping thousands in a sea of flames. Within minutes, Hiroshima was a smoldering ruin. Of its 350,000 residents, an estimated 80,000 people were killed instantly. Tens of thousands more would die in the weeks and months that followed, succumbing to horrific burns, injuries, and a mysterious, deadly sickness. In the hours after the bombing, Hiroshima was a scene from a nightmare. Survivors, who would come to be known as hibakusha, wandered through the scorched, unrecognizable landscape. They were dazed, horribly burned, their skin hanging off their bodies, desperate for water and help. But the hospitals were gone, the doctors dead or overwhelmed. A new invisible killer soon began to claim its victims: radiation poisoning. People who had seemed unharmed began to suffer from vomiting, hair loss, and internal bleeding. It was a cruel, slow death, and for those who survived, the specter of cancer and other long-term health effects would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The world was stunned, yet the horror wasn't over. Just 3 days later, on August 9th, the United States dropped a second, even more powerful atomic bomb. Fat Man, on the city of Nagasaki. Another 40,000 people died in an instant. Faced with this unimaginable level of destruction, Emperor Hirohito finally announced Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, bringing the Second World War to its official end. The decision to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki ignited a fierce debate that still rages today. Supporters argue it was a brutal but necessary act to end the war and save the millions of lives that an invasion of Japan would have cost. They point to the fanaticism of the Japanese military and the certainty of a fight to the last man. Critics, however, argue that Japan was already on the verge of surrender and that the bombings were an unnecessary act of barbarism. Some believe it was less about ending the war and more about demonstrating America's terrifying new power to the Soviet Union. Setting the stage for the Cold War, even the scientists of the Manhattan Project were torn. Oppenheimer, haunted by his creation, famously quoted Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." From the absolute devastation, Hiroshima began the impossible task of rebuilding. The survivors, carrying the weight of unimaginable loss, channeled their grief into a powerful new mission. In 1949, Hiroshima was officially declared a city of peace. The Peace Memorial Park was built at the hypocenter of the blast. At its heart stands the atomic bomb dome, the skeletal remains of a building that miraculously survived, now preserved as a stark and haunting reminder for all of humanity. Every year on August 6th, thousands gather in the park to honor the victims and to amplify the global call for the abolition of nuclear weapons. The legacy of Hiroshima is a profound and complex one. It plunged the world into the nuclear age, sparking an arms race that held the entire planet hostage for decades under the threat of total annihilation. But from those ashes also rose a powerful movement for peace. The story of Sadako Sasaki, a young girl who tried to fold 1,000 paper cranes for a wish to live as she was dying from radiation-induced leukemia, became an international symbol of hope and the innocent victims of war. The lesson of Hiroshima is a solemn one. We possess the godlike power to destroy ourselves, but we must find the wisdom and compassion to choose peace instead. The bombing of Hiroshima was more than just the final act of World War II. It was a fundamental turning point for civilization. It revealed the terrifying pinnacle of human ingenuity and the deepest abyss of human destruction. Today, the city that was once synonymous with death stands as a global beacon of peace and resilience. Its message, born from ashes and echoed across generations, is simple and urgent: never again. Thank you for joining us to reflect on this incredibly important moment in our shared history. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to continue exploring the events that have shaped our world.